Dames en heren, goedemiddag.
Hoi hoi, hello and welcome to the Meet Maastricht podcast. I'm Katrina and together with our resident local Lucy, we will be exploring some of the amazing stories that make Maastricht so special. So sit back, relax and join us as we learn about our favourite Dutch city. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 13 of the Meet Maastricht podcast. As always, I am here with Lucy. How are you doing, Lucy?
Fine, thank you. And I hope you too. Looking out at the bright and sunny day again, hoping for rain. Yeah. I was just thinking, this is the 13th one, isn't it? And we should have, I think now, the benefit of hindsight, we should have aimed this one to be the 11th, because we'll be talking about the number 11 a lot, since today we're talking about Momus. He's a god, a Roman one.
Okay.
He wears a jester's cap, which tells you more or less what his function is. He represents fun, teasing, and mockery, and lightheartedness in general, but often as a cloak, as a means of speaking truth to power. So the jester is always allowed to tell the king the truth, and the king cannot chop his head off. Funny little side note, the head of Momus on top of the building at the Vrijthof did come tumbling down once, because...
I hope it didn't hit anyone.
I don't think so. No, it just crashed through the awning over the terrace, and that was still a glass roof then. In marked contrast to all the dirty linens they have hanging about the beautiful Vrijthof now. But no one was hurt. But they had to repair the awning and replace the head and fix it better. What is interesting about today's subject is that it is less about the place, really. It is only halfway through the story that we get to talk about this particular building. And of course, in many of the other podcasts on interesting places in the old town, we have seen that the building you are looking at today is not the building that was there 200 years ago, 500 years ago. Exceptions confirming the rule, of course, like the Dinghuis, which has just sat there for 500 years. But here, the interesting thing is that there was first a group of people and an idea and. All sorts of activity, and then the building came later. So that's nice, for a change, just to show that you can have all sorts of variations on the theme.
Yeah.
Momus started in a very bleak time. In the 19th century, of course, there were all these conflicts about national borders having been set after the Napoleonic Wars, and then being readjusted in all sorts of ways in wars, big and small, and dragging out or not. And what happened in the Low Countries was that in 1815, this larger kingdom of the Low Countries was created. That is present-day the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg.
Yeah.
In 1830, the southern half rose in revolt. And of course, Maastricht would have gone along with that had it not been the garrison town it was.
Yeah, I think we spoke about that in the General's House episode. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it is a crucial turn in the road for Maastricht, of course. But military might may have determined the city's fate in this respect. But that doesn't mean that the hearts and the minds of the people will turn as well. Of course, that did not happen, and it is part of the story of Momus as well. This breaking off, this being severed from, this debates about loyalty and all of that. The immediate thing that happened was that as long as the conflicts lasted from 1830 to 1839, Maastricht was pretty much locked and under siege, which is it sort of feels a little like we do now. So as long as the city was walled, with all its fortifications intact, and that was the case until 1867, of course, all the gates would close at night, and you couldn't go in or out. And I suppose this sort of stuff was a bit more, this regime would have been more lax in peaceful times and would have grown more lax over time. But from 1830 to 1839, from the walls of Maastricht, you could see the Belgian army, with their guns trained at the city. So under siege, and so people lived in confinement, and of course this was very disruptive to trade and commerce, and the general Maastricht attitude of enjoying life. Because of course the regimen inside the city would have been very, very strict and sober as well. So when all of this was finally resolved in 1839, of course that was an enormous liberation for all aspects of life in Maastricht, and a group of wealthy people with commercial interests, they got the idea that it was time for a celebration. Of course, you do realize this is very much a part of the Maastricht makeup. Let's have a party. This is endemic here, but also, as I said, these people were mainly had a commercial background, and of course, commerce had been hit badly by the lockdown of the preceding 9 years. But what they thought was they'd organize some fun for the city. So they arranged for a big parade, and of course the go-to parades here, apart from the processions proceeding from the church, are of course the carnival parades. And carnival in these bleak years between 1830 and 1839, carnival had been just forbidden, so in the meantime a whole generation had grown up who had no sense of what that was, and these middle class men thought that they'd go and reinstate the tradition, and they looked to the Rhineland, which is adjacent, of course, to Germany just across the border, for examples of what that could look like, and some of the elements were taken over from the Rhineland traditions, but of course Maastricht would go its own way pretty much immediately, and has continued to do so, because the carnival as we celebrate it today looks absolutely not like what they were doing in 1839. So they had this grandiose parade, and it was more or less a historical parade of showing how dignitaries would come to the city and then how they would be received and all of that. And people enjoyed it immensely. That first organization of a big festive celebration of, with the siege is over, we can return to normal life, we can have a party again. That is sort of taken as the beginning of Momus. And Momus is the organization that was formally founded the year after, and which counted everything in 11s. So not in decades, but in 11.
No, just to make it extra hard to work out.
Yes, and then because of course 11 is the number of the fools.
Yes.
So that is an ancient combination, not 10, not 100, not 12, like Christ and his apostles. Especially not that. All of this is non-denominational, but it was the crucial number for everything and everything. There were 11 members of the board, and you had to be able to have 11 drinks in an evening and still stand up straight. So there's booze there right from the beginning as well. There is also, and these are the two themes we will be exploring in this talk. There would be also charity from the beginning. And we tend to look at that in a sort of judgmental way as, the filthy rich giving some alms to the deserving poor. But I think especially in the 19th century, there was more to it than that. Of course, inequality was disgusting.
Yeah.
But and it got worse over the 19th century to the extent that Maastricht was industrializing very fast, and extreme poverty doubled in the second half of the 19th century. And of course, a lot of residents, wealthy residents or well-to-do residents of the city, were absolutely aware of that.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, Momus has played a part in helping to alleviate that. And this also to the extent of simply feeding people, and lots of people every day.
Yeah. Well, that's a sort of an essential thing, right? Because if you're hungry, you can't function. You can't do other things. I think even today, if you, how can you go to, a job interview or anything if you can't concentrate because you haven't eaten for 2 days? So
and then especially this daily soup ration, which would also contain meat.
Yeah.
And basically all necessary foodstuffs in one bowl. This was also being widely dispersed to absolutely thousands of people.
Wow.
Because so many of the women, of course, they were looking at the women. When it comes to cooking, they were still looking at the women. So many of them had no concept of how to feed their families, because as children they had already been taken into the factories. So this only takes 10, 15 years, and an entire generation will not know how to cook.
Wow.
Yeah, this is something I also did not realize, that they simply did not, apart from not having the money, they also did not have the skills.
Yeah, I think, and we underestimate how detrimental that is, because now if you don't know how to cook, you can look online or buy food or pop something in the microwave. But back then, it's a vital life skill. So to survive,
At the same time, McDonald's type, places have existed since earlier than the Romans. Really, I mean, people have been snacking all through history.
Fast food is not new.
Fast food, yes. No, fast food is not new. No. But as I'm saying, in the 19th century, with the rapid industrialization of Maastricht, and the city still being confined to living within the fortifications, so the rich saw this. There was no getting away from it. Everybody was together within the walls. So they have seen what was going on, and a goodly portion of them have tried to alleviate this. And and one of the people who did so was the first big industrialist of the city, Petrus Rigour, who is so often maligned, but who to an extent undeservedly so. I mean, he wasn't the exploitative capitalist only that his sons were.
Okay.
He has definitely made attempts to be an enlightened, humane employer, especially, when seen in the context of the time. I mean, right now, of course, we would say, well, pay your people a living wage, which he didn't, of course. But international trade obliging people to have prices like that. Anyway, Rigour was a member of Momus as well, which... Yeah, of course.
It's interesting because for listeners, we are doing a bicycle tour on... in my accent, it's Rigour, and it just sounds bad. But about his dimensions. But because of that, I looked up a picture of him, and I don't know if you've seen him, Lucy, but he looks like quite a character.
Yes,
so
he was.
I could imagine him as part of this Momus sort of partying and drinking and doing the mockery of traditions and things.
It is just a pity that during the decades that he was a member of Momus, the then mayor of the city, for decades, alderman, mayor of the city. Bales, I suppose we'll get to talking about him at some stage as well. And they were sort of mortal enemies. So that and it took pretty much until the last quarter of the century before all this push and pull sort of came to an end. But that has marred relations within the city in a very bad way.
Yeah.
So when Momus started, the city government, so the council and the mayor, were looking at that askance. askance and not happy with it at all.
Yeah.
Because this was a gathering place of not just the commercial interests in the city, but also of the disgruntled intellectuals.
Right.
So young journalists and artists and entrepreneurs and people who had studied elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that is not in Dutch cities, but in now Belgian and French cities, and they resented having been annexed to the Netherlands because they wanted to be Belgian.
Okay.
And it took several decades for that sort of revolutionary sentiment to die down. But of course, that was a reason for the municipal authorities to look at Momus askance. And they tried to get the military authorities, of course, a powerful force within the city until of course the dissolutions of the fortifications in 1867. They tried to get the military governor to agree to that, and fortunately, the military authorities did not side with the municipal ones. They took a sort of laissez-faire attitude. Okay, let's take it easy. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And all these tensions, political tensions, did die down over the decades. Good. And there's none of this anymore at the end of the 19th century. And they felt it was the military authorities first off felt it was a good idea to have a sort of middle class, commercial class, intellectual class gathering place apart from the grote sociëteit.
Right.
So the grand society, or with a club, really. In English, that would be called the Grand Club. On the other side of the Vrijthof, which is still there, you can look into the windows and see the magnificent plasterwork on the ceilings and the wooden floors, and that is where the really top-notch people congregated. So the highest authorities in the city.
Okay.
The military and the administration, that's where they would go. And then across the square, in the Momus, that would be the meeting place of the burgers, the more middle class segment of society. Right. And the good thing there was also that it was not just the Maastrichtenaren, the indigenous, but that there were also the Hollanders, so members of the military and the civil administration that were from Holland.
Yeah.
Which are pretty much considered foreigners here, but still they would be incorporated in Momus as well.
Okay. So it's more of a representative mix of people who actually live in the city and not just
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But you also see in the course of the 19th century that all these different elements sort of it all becomes less outspoken and less politically charged and less oppositional, and mostly just what is the motto of Momus, plezier and charité. So that is fun and charity. And then there's always one addition to that as well, maar niet buiten de schram. And the Templiers still use that too. You will find it on the posters around the city. And when Carnival is approaching, let's have a good time. Maar niet buiten de schram. It means if you can't take those 11 bottles of alcohol, then please don't. It's do make sure you still behave appropriately. So, they very much did not want to be seen as advocating alcoholism, which, of course, was a huge problem in society at the time as well.
Yeah. So when did the actual Momus building that we can see now, when was that built?
All of this had started in an inn along the canal. So in St. Peter, outside the walls. And they were getting a little tired of having to cut short their meetings to be inside the fortifications on time. Yeah. So because after 10 o'clock the gates were closed, but there would be a small door to let the pedestrians through. Yes, of course, people need to live. They, of course, from the beginning there was some sense that they would continue institutionalizing in some way. In the middle of the 19th century, they moved into a premises in the city as a society, as a foundation. Of course, what happened, having so many members of the commercial class, there were several venues available, and Momus for a while had its activities sort of spread out over several places. And then at a certain moment, about the middle of the century, they landed themselves in one of these temporary spaces at the Vrijthof and decided to buy it. And then they bought the house next to it as well, tore both of them down, and then put up the magnificent building you still see today.
Okay.
By that time, it is the end of the 19th century, really. I am casting about for a year here.
Yeah.
Because they bought these buildings in 1878.
Okay.
It is about that time that the two older houses were demolished and the new Momus building was erected, and that is the building we see today.
Yeah.
The exterior has not changed, except for the fact that first they added cast iron and glass awning, and I think some of that still remains. There will be contemporary pictures with this, so you can check.
Yeah.
It's not all filthy cloth everywhere. Yeah, I just hate that. I mean, it makes the Vrijthof on that side look like a dark cave. And there's this row of magnificent houses facing the square, and you just can't see it at all anymore, and it's pains me. Anyway, so they had this very large and gorgeous building, and they have used that for decades, basically to party. Yeah, that's what it was for.
Yeah.
And
well, then they don't have to leave, do they? They don't have to leave it at 10 o'clock.
No, absolutely not. That may have been part of the point. Yeah. No, but it's the building at that time was much bigger as well, because it extended back to the alleyway that runs parallel to the Vrijthof eastern side there as well. So it had a back entrance.
Okay.
Now that has been split, so the Momus no longer has a back entrance, and also the building the Momus does no longer belong to the society, the Momus, because that was dissolved. It didn't really survive the First World War.
Yeah.
It was at the end of the 19th century that this idea of organizing festivities for the people and providing for their basic needs sort of went out of fashion, really. And of course also societal conditions were changing. The socialist movement was fighting for basic rights for the working people, and charity became something to look down on, or at any rate there was extensive pleading or actual political fighting going on for social provisions that would make this sort of handouts, as they would be condescendingly called as well, no longer necessary.
Yeah.
At the same time, the site of the Momus, so the building itself, that continued to be a party place. And, that is basically what it still is. Of course, the society dissolved, sold the building, and there has been, and it was a bar restaurant for the members of Momus.
Yeah.
It continued to be that for, commercial landlords.
Yeah, well, it's still, even now, like the branding, like on the glass, on the windows, it's still very much the jester and the Momus sort of vibe they're going for. So, which I guess is nice that they've kept up. But I didn't realize it wasn't still associated with some kind of society or group.
Yeah, it isn't, and it hasn't been for over a century.
Yeah.
But it's because the function of the society was so similar to the purely commercial one now. It is it doesn't seem like a terrible break in the historical line. Of course, the horrible breaks are in what happened to the building. Last time I was there, and I fled the premises, there was a horrible 1970s disco vibe going on, and it
I thought you were going to say a fire or something.
no, it's just
horrible, traumatic
Yeah.
Disco.
Yeah, well, come on. I mean, please, I love to dance. That's not the point. But I mean, you shouldn't treat grand rooms like that. And I mean, I do have a suspicion that all the original stuff is still there, and the original stuff is, amongst other things, glorious plasterwork, of course, extensive decorations, and huge mirrors on all the walls.
Oh.
And these mirrors would be during the great carnival balls. They would be painted by the best artists that the city would have at the moment. So and I think all of that has been hidden now by cheap plates and excessive lights.
Yeah, see, but Lucy, mirrors are perfect for disco, because as soon as you get some of those bright, colourful lights, you're in your own little disco ball. It's perfect.
I'll just have to steel myself and go and have a look inside. But it's just. And and this is something that the Momus was just that was their trademark. They might have had fiery political discussions in their clubhouse, but in the city they would be endlessly organizing fun and games.
Yeah.
When the bicycle was a new thing, try and imagine this. There has been a time when the bicycle was a new thing.
Yes.
It was the Momus who would organize the first tours and races on bicycles.
Wow.
Yeah. Stuff like this, all the time. And whenever a parade could be held and floats could be built, they would be doing that. And they would have demonstrations of new sports on the Vrijthof. They would have a drama company, because of course everybody who was writing for theatre would of course have been a Momus member. And as a Momus member, you were pretty much, if you were going to write a play, you were pretty much obliged to write it in dialect. And this is also a crucial aspect of what Momus was doing. The dialect in the 19th century was pretty much only a spoken phenomenon. It did not have much of a written variety. And Momus activity because everything they were doing, their rules and regulations, the minutes of the meeting, everything was in Maastricht dialect.
Wow.
Yes, and this has helped greatly to formulate a sort of standard Maastricht.
Yeah. No, that's amazing to have that that resource, and for the presence of mind, I guess, to say, no, we're going to write it in our own dialect, because that was something that was, I mean, I come from a place with a lot of non-written language. So I think that's amazing. They preserved it in that way as well. Yeah,
and helped to standardize.
Yeah.
Helped to save and helped to spread it, because of course local languages are always under pressure from the language of power of the day.
Yeah.
So in the 19th century, but the early 19th century, that would have been French.
Okay.
So the bourgeoisie of Maastricht spoke French. And hence so many words derived from French in the Maastricht dialect.
Yeah.
At the same time, about half of the stock, so to speak, comes from the Rhineland, which is Germanic. So interesting mix, which of course fits the character of this city around a bridge perfectly.
Yeah.
But anyway, Momus has been instrumental in taking the strands together, and of course the language of power as of 1839 definitely was Dutch, and of course the locals and especially the educated locals of the time have felt that they needed to protect their heritage, just like so many people today who are working in one way or another to do that. So they would have plays, what they would call comieke operas, so an opera, but then the comedy variety of that.
Okay.
So not and then all in dialect, and some of those songs are still being sung, but then usually people will not know that they come from one of the Momus operas. So what we have here is a group of active citizens, and primarily with a cultural intent, carnival and all the other entertainment, but also with a social intent, providing relief to the poor, and sometimes with serving as a political debating club, So it's an interesting phenomenon.
But there was one thing I know we haven't spoken about, which is the Momus cannon, which is the tiny cannon,
Yes.
which you promised you would tell me about.
Oh yeah. I don't. This is one of those aspects of jest that a carnival society of necessity takes very, very seriously. It was of course an idea of the Momus to have this little cannon, because they were play acting being a government, just 11 people governing, and then of course with all the ceremonies would be pastiche satire of all the regular ceremonies of real authorities. So in a garrison town, surrounded by a multitude of big cannon in the fortifications and in the forts.
Yeah.
Of course, it would be an obvious sort of joke to then make a miniature one and make it very, very loud, because that's the whole point of the Momus cannon. It is tiny, but it gives off a terrible bang. So, and even after Momus was dissolved, the little cannon was carefully kept, and it has now passed on into the hands of the Templiers, the city's main carnival foundation, who took over many of the traditions and much of the vocabulary and some of the stuff of Momus after the Second World War.
And so, what day of carnival can you see the cannon? Because I know there's what they light it. So
it's the start. This is how carnival is started. Yes, on Carnival Sunday, it is the opening ceremony, so to speak.
Yeah.
11 shots of the Momus cannon, and then during those 11 shots, the hoisting of het molswief, so the large cloth and wicker variety of the stone statue on the market, but the wicker and cloth one goes up on her pole on the Vrijthof for the duration of carnival. So that is starting on the Sunday at 11 hours 11 minutes and coming down the Tuesday night at midnight exactly.
Yes. So if you want to see the Momus cannon, the little cannon, you have a little bit of time to wait, but hopefully by next carnival we'll be allowed to celebrate in crowds again, and you'll be able to see the cannon.
Yes. Yeah.
If you haven't already.
Yes. Imagine that not being possible. Yeah, that would. Let's not. No. Yes.
Thank you to everyone for listening. What are we going to be talking about?
I'm beginning to miss the. This is ridiculous. The monastic stuff. Because,
okay.
we have so many of them. So I'm going back to a monastery.
How are there possibly any more? There are.
Oh, Katrina, we've barely scratched the surface.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many more. Next week we will be talking about the one that the city knows as Under the Arches.
Oh.
Yeah, Onder de Bogen. A picture Savas Church.
Mm.
And then the side where not the Vrijthof side, but the other side, where the towers are and the bells. Okay, that west work, as it is called in Dutch. I'm not really sure that would be an English architectural term, but anyway, the westwork is connected to the buildings across the street by very, very ancient walls with gates in them, openings for the street to go through. And it is those arches that are being referred to. So we will be talking about the convent that the arches connect to the church.
I've definitely walked past a nun there. I've been walking and there's been a nun. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook by searching Meet Maastricht, and on Instagram at @meet_Maastricht. If you would like to learn more about us, you can also visit our website at meetmaastricht.eu. where you can buy tickets and subscribe to our monthly newsletter so you're always up to date. Thanks again, and tune in next time to learn more about our beautiful city.
Tot ziens.